Welcome to Shovel Talk, a podcast for economic developers. From your friends at the Golden Shovel Agency.
Welcome back, Shovelheads. Producer Darren here with another episode of Shovel Talk. Well, we all know everything is big in Texas, but did you know it's only getting bigger? Did you know Fort Worth is now the 11th largest city in the United States, just surpassing Austin, also in Texas? Robert Allen, President and CEO of the Fort Worth Economic Development Partnership, is here to talk to Bethany all about it. Take it away, Bethany and Robert.
Hello, everyone. I am so excited to be here today with my guest, Robert Allen, who happens to be President and CEO of the Fort Worth Economic Development Partnership, which, for those who don't know, Fort Worth is not a sleepy little town anymore. It happens to be the 11th largest city in the United States. So that's really incredible. And this is going to make our conversation very interesting. Welcome to our podcast, Robert.
Bethany, thank you so much for having me. I appreciate it.
Absolutely. And I do want to make sure that all of our listeners know a little bit about who we're chatting with today. Robert, your role right now, you have leading, again, the economic development in the 11th largest city. That alone is quite an accomplishment and very impressive. But you have background that's significantly more extensive than that. For those who don't know, Robert actually was the Texas Attorney General, worked for the governor's office, and was president and CEO of the Texas Economic Development Corporation. And now you get to tell us a little bit more about that instead of me just bragging about you, which, I did very well.
Well, thank you, Bethany. I appreciate it. And a small edit, I appreciate you. You elevated my role in the Attorney General's office. I was honored to finish there as the Deputy Chief of Staff for Attorney General Greg Abbott. He was the longest serving AG. But my ties to Texas are much deeper than that. I'm a fifth generation Texan, very proud of that. I joke with people that Texas is all I know. Born and raised here, met my wife here, born and raised two children here as well. So fifth generation Texan, grew up in Dallas, Texas, went to the University of Texas at Austin. We're going to kick off a little football game here coming up on Saturday that all Longhorns are going to watch with anticipation. And then I took an internship working for now Senator John Cornyn. At the time, he was Texas's Attorney General. He went on to become a senator for us, still is. And I was lucky enough to get hired on full-time with then Attorney General Greg Abbott. I kicked off 12 years working for him in the Texas Attorney General's office. I felt like I wore several different hats there. And then, as I said, finished as his Deputy Chief of Staff. That was about a 4,000 person agency, 700 lawyers, about a $500 million annual budget by the time we got finished with it. He ran for governor. He won and thankfully asked me if I'd be willing to join his administration, which I jumped at the chance to do. Again, served as Deputy Chief of Staff in charge of the operations and logistics of the governor's office for 2 years and roughly 4 months, at which time then I wanted a little sleep and I wanted to be a husband and a father. And I had the privilege and pleasure to go run the Texas Economic Development Corporation for what I thought was going to be a brief 3-year period. Global pandemic extended that to 6. And then almost 2.5 years ago in April of 23, I was asked to begin this organization, stand it up, build a team, and we'll talk about that in a little bit. So now here I am in Fort Worth and a very, very proud resident.
That's awesome. And again, so much history. And, and that's why I like to get into the background a little bit. And yes, I did elevate your title. Sorry about that, Governor Abbott.
No, thank you. I appreciate it.
Former Attorney General. But, hey, maybe it's in your future. Who knows?
We'll see.
But what I would like to do is start, before we get into Fort Worth, I would love for you to share your insights with other economic developers who are listening about maybe how they could engage on a deeper level with their administration, right? Whether that's, at the city, county, or at the state level, and who's doing economic development in their state level, because you have the insight of being on so many different sides of that coin, right?
Yeah, well said. And I think it's important to always highlight that it takes a team. Mm-hmm. Economic development is a team sport. You hear it often, and we at the EDP certainly believe that, and I certainly believe that. If I do my job well, but the rest of the team doesn't, or vice versa, if I don't do my job well, then we're only going to be half as good or a quarter as good as we possibly could be. So As it relates to connecting with leadership at the local level, all politics is local. I tell people all the time, I remind them that. So, if you're in your city and you're not connected on a first name basis with your city council members, you need to be. You need to offer to go in and brief them on what you're trying to do. I think it's always important to get opinions that are different than your own. You might find an opportunity in that conversation. They might say, "Have you thought about this?" And you haven't. And so when you go before that city council member, potentially with an incentive application or with another need at City Hall, hopefully that's not your first time to see them, right? And you can say, "Hey, really appreciate the past support. You know what we're doing, and this is right in line with what we had previously discussed." And hopefully so that will lead to a positive outcome. And then you can extend beyond that, whether it's the county level or the state level. My experience in Texas is it's a small world. Doesn't matter how big your city is, your county is, your state is, or how small it is for that matter. It's a small world at the end of the day. And those connections that you build, you never know when you're going to need them. I've worked countless projects where I've run across people from my past, and I'm so grateful that I have the ability to pick up the phone and call them and say, "Hey, it's me again. And remember the last conversation we had? Well, I'm back and I got a great project." And you can jump right. It's like riding a bike, right? You can jump right back in if you have those established connections. So it's just proactive outreach really is what it boils down to. Reach out, go see people. Yeah, text messages are good, but face-to-face meetings are the best. Nothing can replace that. So offer to sit down, offer to brief people on what you're doing, and then take that input. We have a saying around here that's grade our paper. And so when we go see people, we always end by saying, "Hey, please grade our paper. If you see something, if you have questions," and you can't do that, as well from the other end of the phone or again on a text message. It's so much more productive, I found, to just be in front of people. So just good old fashioned networking, getting in front of them, sitting down and having a great conversation is really the key piece of advice I'd give.
Sure. And that is really good advice, especially for newer economic developers. There's been so much turnover in our industry since COVID. I'm not saying that that's related, but there's been a lot of retirements, right? So people are really changing quite a bit, or even moving from community to community, and you have to reestablish those relationships every time you do, because you're right, you absolutely have to have support. And I know from our perspective, the clients we work with, the ones who make the most progress are usually the ones who have been able to create those teams around them. So great advice.
And on the other side too, the elected officials have a tendency to change. So it's a constant effort you've got to be mindful of, and also paying attention to that election cycle as well, because you may have new faces and new seats, and you want to just basically start that whole game over again.
Yeah, absolutely. Great advice. So I would like to spend some time now diving into what's happening at Fort Worth. I mean, the growth there has been so remarkable. What has it been in the last decade? I mean, you have the percentages, I'm sure, just off the top of your head.
Yeah, first and foremost, it's one of the fastest growing large cities in America. And what you have to remind yourself for us in Texas is one of the fastest growing states. And at times, it's the fastest growing state, depending on the metric, whether it's GDP or population growth. And Fort Worth, if you look at population growth, and we'll dig a little bit into this deeper in a minute, it is the fastest growing large city in America. And so when you talk about that, you said now the 11th largest city in Texas. That's true. We just passed, in the country, in Texas, 4th largest city. We just passed Austin,
Sure.
Where I spent about 25 years before I moved to Fort Worth. When you think about that scale, now officially 1 million residents inside of our city limits. Obviously, many, many more beyond that when you look at our region, and over 8 million plus in the greater Dallas-Fort Worth metroplex. Now the only metroplex with 2 1 million person cities within earshot of each other. We've got about 32 miles that separate Dallas and Fort Worth. And now we each are 1 million strong. And that is the only metroplex in the entire United States that can say that. So one of one, unique territory. And so, yeah, the growth has been really astounding. And then obviously we've added some really nice wins and projects to that growth as well. It's been great over the last 2 years, really getting to understand this community. I'd always paid attention to Fort Worth through my time in Austin and also as a Dallas native. And now just to see this trajectory really come to light with our higher education growth, with our film growth, we'll talk about that in a little bit as well. And then with some of our traditional advanced manufacturing growth, We really are on fire, as they say, and it's been a blast the last 2 years to get to witness
Sure.
every part of it.
So what's interesting to me is like you said, you're in such a unique position. There's not really a proven roadmap for this because we do have obviously large cities all throughout the country, but they're typically not so adjacent that the reality is the growth between the two. I mean, it's going to be difficult to differentiate them. So no proven roadmap. You're kind of creating this right now. So what are some of the unique challenges that you face when it comes to planning and economic development when you don't really have a model to follow?
Yeah, absolutely. Well said, right? So first and foremost, you got to think about safety. So keeping your community safe. Fort Worth just announced our new police chief. We're really, really thrilled to have him join us. Eddie Garcia, very well-known name in law enforcement, fills some really big shoes left by Chief Neil Noakes. But safety is paramount, and in Fort Worth, safety is priority number one. Beyond that, you begin to look at transportation. You got to move your residents. And that's the thing that's so unique about the Dallas-Fort Worth Metroplex is, folks live all over, they work all over, and so they commute between communities. You may go to Dallas for an event, you may come to Fort Worth for an event, or vice versa. So
Sure.
you've got to be able to move folks, you got to be able to move residents. Nobody likes sitting in traffic. And as you said, no roadmap for this. Well said. There are roadmaps for what not to do.
Sure.
You can see cities across the country who have, significant traffic challenges. And so infrastructure investment, roadway investment, moving our residents, super, super important to keeping this robust economy afloat. From there, you start looking at things like power generation, right? Water needs, the basics of what we need to move our economy forward. If we've got a large manufacturer coming in, making sure that we're being diligent and thoughtful about that power usage. Data centers, obviously, Texas is known for data centers right now. We continue to deliver on that front. The supercomputing sector here in Texas, specifically in Fort Worth, is exploding with growth. We just landed two massive AI supercomputer facilities representing about $670 million in capital investment and 800 jobs. So you've got to power those. In some cases, you've got to provide the water for those, all while balancing that growth that we talked about before. So those are three key things just right off the bat that our leadership here, and I know the leadership in Dallas, is keenly focused on. And the last point I'll make here is the relationship is so unique here that you do have to work with your partners over in Dallas. Don't be mistaken. If it comes down to an economic development project where it's us versus them, I'm going to do everything I can for us to win in Fort Worth. But I tell people, for me, the priority is Fort Worth, North Texas, and then after that, hopefully nobody wins. But I have to look at it that way, and that's a.
I can't endorse that, Robert. I can't.
I know you can. And I've got some great friends across the country, and obviously, if they're in something that we're not in it, obviously, I want them to win. But I have to look at it that way in the Metroplex, and we have to think about things regionally because at the end of the day, our success is going to be tied together one way or the other as we move forward in this process.
Well, one of the things that you said there that I want to call out for our listeners, and obviously there's a lot of you that listen that have been in economic development for a long time. You know these things inside and out. But for those that are new to the industry, Robert said something that I'm hoping you picked up on, and that is the importance of focusing on the maybe let's call it unsexy, unattractive sides of economic development, right?
Sure.
Public safety being one, infrastructure being two. And it's really important to call out the fact that you cannot support massive growth if your community is not willing to invest in those things.
That's absolutely right, Bethany. And we call it focusing on small ball here at the EDP. It's just kind of a saying that I picked up early on in my career. If you don't do small ball well, you can't do big ball. And what I mean by that is if you don't take care of the basics and the fundamentals, when it comes time for that opportunity, regardless of the size of your community, economic developers, if you do this long enough, you're going to be faced with a once in a lifetime career opportunity project. And if you don't have your fundamentals under control, and if you can't go in there and confidently talk to that client and explain to them that their employees are going to be safe and are going to enjoy the community they live in, and they're going to have access to everything that they need, and they're not going to regret the decision, then you can sell from a much more solid foundational position. And I think also you're going to have a much greater opportunity for upside and a much higher probability of success. But you're right; those aren't the things necessarily that make the headlines, unless they go, the wrong way or something goes wrong, right? So, taking care of that small ball, taking care of the fundamentals, it's critical to the long-term success of your community. Even a community the size of Fort Worth, you got to pay attention to the basics. We do, our leadership does, and I think that's why you've seen so much success here.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think it's necessary for economic developers to be willing to have those hard conversations, because those things require significant investment before you see a return. And that makes it sometimes a harder sell in communities where stakeholders don't see the vision. But you said it so well by talking about that once in a career opportunity. When it comes, you want to make sure that you're prepared. So thinking ahead and being strategic like that is what it takes.
And tie that back to where we started briefly. If you've been in touch of your local electeds, potentially big projects on the infrastructure side that are coming, or if there's a delay in a project. And so, you obviously don't ever want to be surprised in this business. You want to try to make sure you've got everything under control. You know what the timelines are so you can manage expectations. And so if you're meeting with those elected officials who take that challenge on every day, you hopefully have the latest information and you can convey that to the client. And I have found in my career, clients just want to be able to manage expectations and timelines. And if you can do that well and effectively, then you put yourself in a position to win.
Yeah, absolutely. Well said. It's not that you always have to give good news, but you need to make sure your news is accurate.
Well said.
Yeah. So I do want to talk about what you're doing in business attraction. You mentioned AI, you mentioned supercomputing, you mentioned film. You have a lot of really diverse industries. I'd love to hear more about how you're approaching attracting them and making sure they're all supported when their needs are actually quite different.
Yeah, two different things there, right? There's winning, and then there's taking care of the winning team, right? So we talk about that a lot in our shop. Winning the project is frankly only the beginning of the effort and the work. And I remind economic developers all the time, just because you have the opportunity to stand at the press conference or put out a press release or a quote and say, finally, yes, welcome to our community, that's when the hard work begins, because then that company needs to build roots and foundations, and you want them to be in your community for a long, long period of time. So one of the things that was key to us at the Economic Development Partnership when we stood up and when we began hiring and fielding our team was being more strategic on offense. And what does that mean for us in Fort Worth? It means recognizing where we are strong, using those strengths, using those connections to go build and diversify the economy even greater as we move forward, and not always just saying yes to something. Making sure that we do our homework, we do our due diligence. Is it a good fit for our community? If it's not a great fit, not being afraid to sit down with a client and say, look, we have some issues, we have some challenges. We're not sure that the relationship here is as good a fit as we want in Fort Worth. And working through those issues and those challenges, being transparent as best you can with the client, making sure you're clearly communicating. One of the ways that we are going to do that is by nurturing the relationships and connections that we already have in our community. This is something that I find is sometimes overlooked. When I talk to my colleagues, they're so focused on maybe international recruitment. We've got to go get into other countries and international. We have taken a little bit of a different approach here. And don't get me wrong, we are working international recruitment very, very hard. But we started at home and we said, okay, who do we already have here? What relationships do they have? Can we work on suppliers to some of our biggest employers? And then also, where is our talent strengths and how can we leverage that talent? And then ultimately, we have built a matrix to qualify and score companies that we have put into a business attraction and recruitment campaign. And then we have gone to work both digitally and traditionally through good old-fashioned networking to reach out to several companies to see if they would have an interest in Fort Worth through known relationships and connections, leveraged our development community. We've got some really, really strong players in the development community here as well. Again, what do they want to see in their facilities, and how can we help make connections and ultimately open up dialogue and conversations? So a lot of your economic developers do this day in and day out. For us, it's just about being more strategic and thoughtful and go on offense constantly.
Sure.
You can't just sit back, and I'm a sports fan and nut, so I apologize. A lot of sports analogies here, but you really can't just sit there with the glove out and hope that people are going to show up. You got to go out. You got to really work to produce your own pipeline in addition to what may show up. And if you do both of those and you do those well, I think ultimately you'll be successful. We've seen the beginnings of that in Fort Worth for sure, building on some of our past momentum. And we expect to take that to a new level in the years to come.
Sure. Yeah, absolutely. And at Golden Shovel, as we are an economic development strategy and communications firm, I don't use sports analogies, but I'll use yours today with your glove out, standing there with your glove out. I like that. We really say the same thing essentially, right? It doesn't matter if you are a large metropolitan area like Fort Worth, or if you're a very small rural community, right? If you're not actively working to attract business and support the ones that you have, it's not going to necessarily happen for you, right? And we want to take more control over our own destinies. I definitely like the approach that you guys are taking to scoring the companies that are considering coming there. That definitely emphasizes how strategic you're being to make sure businesses fit within your ecosystem.
Yeah, it is. So when I arrived and I kind of looked at what we had, I realized from the inbound project perspective, we really didn't have a scoring matrix where we could say, this inbound opportunity score is very high. So my team got to work building that inbound analysis and that matrix. And it's really simple. It kicks out a red light, yellow light, green light, and it does exactly what you would expect. Green light, all systems go get it. Yellow light, we need to ask some questions or we need more data. Red light's probably a hard stop. And why is it a hard stop? Could be a number of things. And so we really just needed to be able to go into our business leadership in the city, our political leadership in the city, and EDP is a privately funded organization. So I had to look at those that support us and say, we are chasing this, tackling this project because it scores astronomically high for these reasons. Or conversely, and again, I think this is equally important, saying we are not going to put our limited resources in working this lead because of these factors, which ultimately means it is not a great fit for what we're looking for in Fort Worth. And I find that latter piece is one that often is not discussed all that much. It's not an economic developer's mindset to say, thanks, but no thanks. We're in the business of saying yes. We're in the business of saying we want you. We're open for business. But we felt like, and our leadership here in Fort Worth felt like it was very important for us to be strategic about what we want and really not be afraid to have an open, honest conversation with projects, to say, hey, we're not really sure because of these factors that it's a great fit. And I find in the conversations we've had, and we've had plenty of them, that's really been appreciated, frankly, on the other side of the conversations. They appreciate that. They want to know that so they can get on with either correcting, fixing, or, maybe finding a community that may be a better fit.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay. So question for open and honest communication, put you on the spot here. One of the challenges that economic developers often have with business attraction is local businesses can get upset because they can feel like their talent might be poached, for example, or their market share might be lost. So when you're looking at this matrix and having those conversations, are you involving your business community at all, or just tell us how you're approaching that?
Always involving our business community.
Okay.
You must. We cannot go out in a vacuum and make these decisions, put this data together, and ultimately go have a target list of companies without the input of our existing business community. To your point, just basic, economic development 101 suggests, look, if I go out and land a major employer and they're going to need, again, our most recent 2 wins combined 800 plus new jobs, we know that we're going to have to make sure that we're on top of our workforce game. If I hurt an existing business by attracting new and haven't thought about that, well, then it makes my to-do list even greater because I may have an existing business that starts to look elsewhere. And we obviously don't want that. No community wants that.
Right.
You want to nurture, foster, and grow what you have, and then you want to add to it to diversify the economy. So absolutely talk to the business community. We do it all the time. In fact, I have one of our briefings with our investors Wednesday, and that'd be tomorrow. And one of the things we talk about openly with them is, look, this is what we're trying to do. These are the industries and sectors we are targeting. Sometimes you can't get into a name by name basis, obviously, of who you're going after, but we try to share as much as we can, seek the feedback. Again, as I said, grade the paper so that we can all try to be on the same page to diversify the economy in Fort Worth. And the truth of the matter is, Bethany, if you do it well, you can really help bolster some of your existing businesses. If you bring in a supplier, or if you bring in, a complementary industry or business, that may help them in the end. And the only way you can find that out is by having an open conversation with them. But it's sensitive, as you pointed out. A lot of times it's an uncomfortable thing for economic developers to do, but I think you've got to do it to be successful.
Yeah, when we work on strategy projects for clients, we really emphasize stakeholder engagement because of that exact reason. Because, too many times economic developers and their board, right, best intentions can put out something and it just makes the business community upset because they weren't included and they feel like it's going to encroach on their territory, which, like you said, if done correctly, that's not the case at all, right? You're building a stronger and more resilient economy. But if they don't have a seat at that table, it can be some tough conversations after the fact.
That's exactly right.
So you talked about the talent side, and that is so critical to modern economic development, next gen economic development, so to speak. I mean, you've been in this for a long time. And so you remember, like I do, back in the day where everyone was just talking about available sites, right? It was just industrial focused. And you can't be successful doing that anymore. You have to have talent as part of your strategy. So how are you supporting the growth of your community from the talent perspective? So that way you're not just recruiting people locally that can commute in, but actually being able to grow Fort Worth internally as well.
Well, I think the pandemic put this in a very, very clear perspective for a lot of people. Like, the pandemic was wildly challenging for a number of reasons, and obviously loss of life was devastating. What it did, though, on the talent side is force everybody to realize how important your people are at the end of the day. And it also showed that the economy could continue to churn, in new ways. Zoom obviously was not something that most people, myself included, was a regular user of before. Here we are on this very conversation utilizing the tool still. So one of the ways in which you have to, I think, really stay on top of your talent game, as you pointed out, natural migration, whether it's in, out, for a metroplex like us, could be, in cities 10, 15, 20, 30 miles away or beyond, is not enough to win the game. And so beyond that, what do you do? What we do, and what I did when we came into the EDP, was immediately start engaging our institutions of higher education, Tarrant County College, which is our workforce 2-year degree college, and then all of our academic partners all the way down into the high school level. And we started conversations by saying, this is what we feel confident saying our talent is today. But what I want to know is, what does our talent pipeline deliver in 3 years, 5, 7, 10? And where is it coming from? What sectors are they identifying in high school that they are interested in? How do we keep them in Fort Worth and in the region? And we've instituted a couple of really interesting relationships and conversations with all of our partners, so we can look at that pipeline to try to be as sticky as we possibly can with that talent. Obviously, there's a number of training programs with our businesses locally that have partnered with our training institutions and our workforce institutions to meet the specific needs of those businesses. That's one way right there in which you can really work to build a strong magnetic pipeline. If you get your businesses engaged with your workforce partners, and you get those businesses to say, I need X, Y, and Z talent today and in the next 3 years, if you can get your workforce experts to go to work on producing that talent.
Right.
So when it comes out, it's plug and play, ready to go. You've just put yourself in an advantageous position, and you've really encouraged young folks or folks who may be transitioning at all ends of the spectrum to not look elsewhere and to not look at a job in another community that doesn't benefit you at the end of the day. So again, it starts early here in Fort Worth and in Tarrant County. We want to get those high school pipelines. We want to know where that talent is looking, what it's looking for, what kind of jobs. And then ultimately you're talking to your business community and you're saying, what do you need? What kind of skills do you need? What kind of skills do you forecast you're going to need? And I think for us, a prime example of that is our aerospace defense sector. Obviously, we've been very, very well known in this space. The governor just designated Fort Worth as the aviation aerospace defense capital of Texas. We're very proud of that designation. And our large employers, take Lockheed Martin, for example. They build the most advanced fighter jet in the world, the F-35. They can't do that without lots and lots of talented people.
Right.
And we got to make sure that we continue to churn out that talent, because every day around here, we're turning out jets. You hear them in the skies when they're overhead. And that's what we want to continue to do. And that's one of the ways in which we do it.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, the collaboration between your business community and your workforce leaders is absolutely critical. We really encourage getting involved at the high school level, especially in communities where they're seeing a lot of kids graduate from high school and then leave. If you don't leverage that opportunity to expose them to what's available for their career prior to them graduating, you may never get that opportunity. So definitely a great point. And that's true no matter the size of your community.
Just because they live in our community and maybe in school in our community doesn't mean that they know the business opportunities in our community.
Oh, most have no idea.
That's right. And
I mean, you said you have 2 kids. My husband and I have 7. And and I'm telling you that they don't know what businesses are in a community. Like, that's not on their radar.
Yes. And again, it's important to introduce that early. And you can also, and this, we could do a whole nother conversation on this. It's also important to identify that, a 4-year degree may not be for every student.
Right.
And we've got a lot of wonderful employers who are interested in either right out of high school or a technical degree or certificate degree, maybe a 2-year degree. And you've got to produce at all levels for sure.
Yeah, absolutely. One of the things, so at Golden Shovel, we have a virtual reality production team. And one of the things that we've done, which I find really interesting and effective, is going into those employers and creating the virtual experiences that then high school kids could put on the goggles and actually see it for themselves.
Sure.
A lot of those places are locked down, right? They're not going to open their doors for everyone to come in and see what they're doing for security reasons and safety reasons. So it's interesting. We have to get more creative in how we engage our youth. Their attention spans are not prone to read a brochure.
That's exactly right. And the other thing I will say too, and something that we're very focused on here in Fort Worth, our mayor has a wonderful service background in the education space. And so this is something that is near and dear to her as well. It's finding that passion with that student and linking that passion with opportunities at home, if that's what they want, and then letting them basically run with it. Students, I'm blown away all the time with what I see when I go into schools or when I talk to students, when I look at internships and what they're doing. The future of this country, the future of Fort Worth, the future of Texas is going to be very, very bright because of our youth. And it's incumbent upon us, in my opinion, to make sure that you find those opportunities, that passion, link it up with opportunities in your community, and just sit back and watch, because it is fascinating what they can do.
Yeah, absolutely. It's building the connections. And that's true for young students. It's true for older adults that may need to retrain because our economies are changing. It's true for talent that's moving in. And that's a unique role that economic developers can play. It goes back to the very first things we discussed, right? Is building those partnerships and relationships. And when you've done that really effectively, you can be that conduit that plugs people in. So that journey can continue without you, right? You don't need a handhold every step of the way, but you can be that conduit and that open door.
Yeah, absolutely.
One of the things that I wanted to dive into more with Fort Worth is your downtown corridors. And I know that, when you've been working on those, you have considered what your residents have needed in addition to businesses. So I feel like that kind of feeds into that talent conversation. Tell us more about what you're doing there.
Yeah, like most downtowns, we constantly are looking at ways to grow, to diversify, add new opportunities. We have great partners that we work with. Downtown Fort Worth Inc. focuses on our downtown. They do a phenomenal job. Our city teams do a phenomenal job. it began, frankly, in Fort Worth with Sundance Square. When you go to downtown Fort Worth, you can't help but touch Sundance Square, experience it, see it. It's 35 blocks. It is, really at the heart of what downtown Fort Worth is known for. And what that means is open space. There's a great big fountain space in the heart of Sundance Square, Sundance Plaza, where it's always activations. There's always people. You can go grab a cup of coffee and just sit back and relax, take a breather. You can take a business meeting there, and there's always activity. There's always evening events. It's a great place in our downtown, and it really encourages our residents to get out of their office, of their residence, wherever they may be, get out of those buildings and experience, Fort Worth on the ground level. Most recently, what you've seen in our Fort Worth growth with the onboarding, if you will, of the Texas A&M campus. They've got a brand new law school, research and innovation buildings that are taking shape as we speak. This is closer to our convention center on the southern end of our downtown. Our convention center is undergoing a massive renovation right now. And all of that will link up and build out really a whole new area of our downtown. You've got some new residential opportunities that have come online in that area as well. And you have some new ownership, meaning some dirt has recently transacted. You've got new owners that are coming in and looking at plans for what they want to do with some of those city blocks. But for us in Fort Worth, it's about walkability. It's about, as we talk about livability, that starts with, again, safe communities, the ability to go get out, walk to a restaurant, walk to an event. It also starts with open space, green space. Our mayor, Good Natured Initiative, bold plans she unveiled in 2023 to secure 10,000 acres by 2028 and secure that from future development so that we can preserve it for open space. Well on our way. But I think that's important to highlight. Both in our downtown, we have a massive park renovation project that is underway here. Paddock and Heritage Park. It is really the front door in front of our beautiful county courthouse, Tarrant County Courthouse. Sits up on a bluff overlooking the north part, historic North Fort Worth. It is where, frankly, the original fort in Fort Worth was established. Beautiful vistas, beautiful views. That park, those two parks are going to be reimagined, reopened for use by the public. So that gets all back to our downtown core and ensuring that our residents have a place to go that feels like their own, where they can connect, where they can live, where they can work and play. And I think that's really important, especially as you look at a city of our size, where we have great growth happening all around the city core, but we also have great growth happening in the core. I mean, when you look at downtowns in America and the US right now, there are some downtowns that are struggling a little bit. And I think that has been a key focus for leaders, myself included in Fort Worth, is to ensure that we don't lose that and that we focus on our downtown core. And those are just a couple of ways I just listed of how we're doing that. And I'm pretty bullish on our downtown core moving forward in Fort Worth. It's going to continue to be a very big key for us as we build.
Sure. No, that's fantastic. And how interesting that the mayor is focused on creating those green spaces. That really is a fantastic idea because we know that it improves quality of life and really, millennials, Gen Z, they're looking for quality of life when they decide where they're going to work, where they're going to live, right? It's not just about the salary anymore. So that's definitely strategic in addition to going to make the city more accessible and beautiful. So very interesting.
It proves just very simply that you can have both, right? Yeah. You can have open space, green space, great parks, great areas for your citizens to enjoy, but you can also grow. You can do both. We believe that's the case in Fort Worth, and that's our mission.
That's awesome. So, hey, before we get into the second half of our podcast, where I want to ask some questions about you, I wanted to give you an opportunity to tell us anything more about Fort Worth, anything going on that we haven't discussed that you'd like to share with our listeners.
Well, we touched on it briefly, and I think it's the film industry. Fort Worth has been in the headlines over the last few years for our film industry. Just a couple of weeks ago, we made record-breaking news again when we unveiled a combination 450,000 square foot, 2 facilities, Hillwood and SGS Studios. It is where you are going to see filming for some series that are well known, such as Landman 2. The Madison is coming online. Very excited about that with Michelle Pfeiffer. And several other amazing shows that are currently underway. A day doesn't go by in Fort Worth where you are driving by a film set. It happens all over the place. It's very exciting. You'll get citizens talking about it. And again, our film industry, we really think Fort Worth is positioned well to take advantage of that growth. And that 450,000 square foot 2-studio facility I just mentioned, it's the largest in Texas. Texas just passed a robust film incentive. And so we think we're very, very well positioned to continue to grow that sector for our economy. And I always just put a fine point on this for people. It's not what you see. Mm-hmm. You might see Michelle Pfeiffer, right? You might see the stars of Landman. You might see you might see Nicole Kidman, right? Filming Lioness. It's all of the other tangential jobs that come with it. It's the catering. Right. It's the lumber yards, the electricians, the lighting experts, the wardrobe experts. Mm-hmm. You don't read about that in the headlines all the time. So I always want to make that point. Those are jobs. Those are real jobs. Those are people in our community that are doing really well. So very, very bullish on the film industry in Fort Worth. I'm a fan. I watch the shows, and it's great to see all of those being filmed in Fort Worth. And then a finer point I'll just put again on our higher education growth is unbelievable. And we're really, really excited and bullish on what that growth in our higher education sector will do. We've mentioned TCU. We've mentioned Texas A&M. We were part of a project for the University of Texas at Arlington called UTA West. It is a brand new 51-acre dedicated education campus coming online in the western portion of our area. It's going to be over in Tarrant and Parker County, some of the fastest growing counties in the state of Texas. And so UTA West is coming online. We're very, very bullish. That's happening at the Walsh development, several thousand-acre development out west that is really on fire. So again, we're really investing in our education pipeline, our talent pipeline. Very excited about that. TCC, again, our 2-year technical trade school, community college, crushing it, expanding like crazy. Texas Wesleyan, Tarleton, all of them in our backyard are growing, and that's very, very good for us as it relates to talent moving forward.
Oh, absolutely. That's really important to have that talent pipeline. And if you have more students entering the pipeline, even better for your local business community.
You got it.
So that's excellent. Well, I wanted to take a minute just to, talk a little bit about your background outside of work. What really made you interested in economic development in the first place?
Yeah, it's a great question. Again, as a 5th-generation Texan, there's been a lot of successful business folks in my family. And so I was, born and raised in a service household. And it was give back to your community, and how you did that was really up to you. So when I went to work at the Texas Attorney General's office, giving back to my state that I love dearly, that was my way, I felt like, of giving back. And then lo and behold, I was in a very fortunate position to work for a governor, and Governor Abbott, and it was the honor of a lifetime. And that's really where I started to understand what economic development can do. The governor's office has the Economic Development and Tourism Division. I worked very closely with those leaders when I was Deputy Chief of Staff, and you get to see the impact on communities across the state. And so as my wife and I contemplated having children and ultimately had children, it was important to me to drive around the state, the city, the communities that I love so dearly, and look at things that I felt like were positive impacts to those communities. And it was really fun to be able to say, yeah, I had a little bit to do with that. And I was on the team that had something to do with that, and go around the state to do that. So I think it's really important as you think about economic development to not get lost in the nuts and bolts. It's very easy to think about, okay, we got to do this today. The deadline, for X is today. The deadline for real estate responses is tomorrow, or the client needs this. When you're thinking about those things, think about the impact of the project on your community.
Sure.
Think about the jobs that it will create, the new talent that it will bring to your community. That, for me, is what gets me so excited. It's what continues to get me out of bed every day and do this work, because at the end of the day, if we are successful in doing all the work that we focus on day in and day out, businesses will be in this community long after I'm gone. Mm-hmm. And that's really the way that I ask people to grade me and to judge me. It's not the projects that we just landed. It's when I'm done, And when I'm either retired or gone, are those projects still in Fort Worth, Texas? Are those projects that I worked on before I got here still in the state of Texas? If the answer to that is yes, I'm happy. And that ultimately means at the day that we did our job and we did it well.
Yeah, absolutely. And that legacy is something that economic developers are in an incredibly unique position to have. Most people can't say that their job has the potential of making a positive impact on future generations to such a degree. And that is a privilege. It's a great responsibility, but also a privilege. And I like how you mentioned, being fifth generation and your family's attitude of service, a focus on service, because economic development truly is. You are serving your community in a massive way.
Absolutely. And keeping that first and foremost, every day when you go into the office and you crank on those long days, sometimes when it can get lost, right? In the smoke, and when you got a lot of things going on, you got to always remember in the back of your mind, what, in my opinion, what the greater good is.
Sure.
And what the long-term impact is.
Yeah, absolutely. How can we make the most good for the most amount of people?
That's exactly right. That's exactly right. Well said.
All right. Well, the other part of getting to know you is making you play our fun game, our shovel toss game. So with this game, for everyone listening, I did not prep Robert. Okay. So he does not know what I'm going to ask. And I'm going to see how many questions you can answer in just 1 minute.
Okay, let's do it.
So rapid fire. You ready?
I'm ready.
All right. If you could master any skill, what would it be?
Being on time.
Go-to karaoke song.
Ooh. Journey, Don't Stop Believing.
Travel bucket list.
France.
Food combination you love but is weird.
For anybody outside of Texas, chips and queso.
First thing you do if you were invisible.
Scare my kids.
If your life had a theme song, what would it be? My life had a theme song, what would it be? I don't know. I got to pass on that one. Okay, pineapple on pizza, yes or no?
Yes.
Fictional character you would swap lives with? For a day.
For a day. Lead character in Landman, Billy Bob Thornton.
All right, so you got 8 questions in 1 minute, but I am going to ask you a final question outside of the timer.
Sure.
What do you want to be remembered for? You can't give the answer you shared earlier.
Yeah, first and foremost, a good husband. That's where it starts for me. And then second, a good father. That's where my whole world in the order, I met my wife first as we remind our children. They came next. So those two things are critically important to me. If I achieve those two things, doesn't matter what happens professionally. And then if you look at it professionally, again, as I said before, for me, it's what good have we done for the community, for the state that I love so much. And ultimately, when I'm gone, in some small way, I hope people will say, yeah, God, that was the greatest thing that Fort Worth did, or that was a wonderful addition to our economy. And then when I work for the state, hopefully people will say, yeah, those were positive impacts in the state, and ultimately helped us continue to be, the state that we are.
That's awesome. Well, those are definitely good things to aspire towards, and you're well on your way to accomplishing all of them. So thank you so much for being here with us today. Again, everyone, Robert Allen, President and CEO in Fort Worth, Texas. So obviously find him on LinkedIn. Go and visit their website if you want to learn more about what the Fort Worth Economic Development Partnership is up to.
Bethany, thank you so much for the time. I appreciate it. And I got to think about that song.
Yes.
You've given me something to think about. I appreciate that.
All right, Robert, thanks so much. Have a good one.
Thank you. You as well.
Thank you, Bethany and Robert. Before we sign off today, I do want to remind you all about our resource learning center at goldenshovelagency.com. Here you can find all of these podcasts that you love to listen to, along with downloadable ebooks, webinars, case studies, etc. And also, Golden Shovel has grown quite a bit in 2025. And if you want to see some of the new team members, go to the About section and check out our team. We are spanning North America these days and only to continue to grow. Stay tuned for another episode of Shovel Talk coming soon. I am producer Darren, signing off.